Jamie, you want to run this one?
Sure, I can do that. Let me pull up the agenda in front of me. Mandy, are you already started the recording? Can we do a roll call?
Yes, ma'am. All right. Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Miss Allard?
Here.
Miss Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Rivera?
Present.
And then for members of the assembly that are not on the committee, Mr. Dunbar? Miss LaFrance? Mr. Perez Verdia? Miss Quinn Davidson? Miss Zalatel? Chair, so you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mandy. So we're going to call to order introductions. Is there anybody specific that needs to be announced on this one, John? Just because I haven't shared this one by myself yet.
No, we've narrowed this agenda down quite a bit because the kind of the omnibus marijuana changes aren't ready yet. So
Right.
It's really just a discussion of kind of what people see as goals for 2022. And I've got a list I can run through, and I think others may, and we can just kind of brainstorm and add things to it.
John, do you want to go ahead and start on your goals first, and then we could just go through other members?
I could, it might be, I've got a few, I know Craig Lyons here. I don't see all the other staff. But I'm happy to go through it, but also, staff, particularly, Craig's new to the planning job and coming here, and might have some things too. So I guess, yeah, I'll go ahead and start, but I want to make sure I give them a chance. And Mandy, are you able to like type things down, and can we see them on the screen, Mandy?
Sure, I can do that.
Yeah, I probably should have emailed you something, but and my list is somewhat haphazard, and it's a lot of this may be aspirational, and some have been on the list for quite a bit of time. But when we have had discussions with Anchorage Community Land Trust regarding permits for markets and just how they're working for brand new entrepreneurs who are just testing markets, and they are working with the health department on that. But that remains on our list, and I suspect we'll see something in the next month or two that they've worked out, and we can consider that. And tied with that is the fees for the permits and for cottage foods and things like that. And again, they're working on that. So my guess is in next 6 weeks or so, we'll see that. Another issue that we've discussed and really haven't done much on, I know Chris Constant's been real involved with this, but it's asserting, municipal rights of way and easements that we've basically not really paid attention to. And in some cases, adjacent property owners have kind of usurped them, intentionally or not. I think a lot of it is just fairly innocent, but at some point we need to be prepared. How will we move these things forward? If we need to use those, or make these, provide access for the public. Another one that's come up recently, talking to the South Central director for Lasset DOT, he says that our mass specs, and that's, I forget what mass stands for, so Craig may know, Manual of Design Specifications or whatever that the city uses, don't always meet federal requirements. And that creates some problems on state roads where they may put in some kind of light that, or they may feel required to put in something that meets municipal mass spec standards, but it doesn't meet the federal requirements for federally funded roads. An example was some types of light fixtures, that we specify aren't made in this country, and the federal requirements require by American First. So I don't know a lot on that, but that's something that he was frustrated with. So I don't know if it's been lingering for decades and we're used to it, or if it's something that we could fix easily. Another one is for a septic and well, you get a certificate of on-site acceptance. You send in, get it engineered and get it tested, and you get a little document that says it's good. So when you want to sell your house, a lot of times people, if they're on well and septic, will get that so that they can show the home buyer, yes, the system's good, but it only lasts 90 days. So if you don't sell your house in 90 days, then you have to get another one to this will be good at the bank and for the buyer, and might consider making that a little bit longer because you can go actually decades without a COSA. It's only when you sell a house, so it seems like it could go longer.
John, if I might
Another
interrupt.
yeah, I think people could, Jamie. I don't know if go in the queue or however you want to. This is probably a
Just
pretty free flow
clarification.
conversation.
Just clarification. It's certificate of on-site systems approval.
On-site system approval. Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. Maybe we can have Mr. Lyons go, and then is David wanting to say anything as well, Mr. Whitfield?
This is Dave Whitfield. No, unless there's questions for me. But
Okay, I would let's go with Craig. Craig, are you able to speak?
I'm here. I'm kind of in a listen only mode at this point as I'm getting ramped up. So nothing too specific to add.
I think that's fine. John, do you have any other input, or is there anybody else?
Okay, I got a whole list.
Okay, keep going.
Got about 10 more.
Okay, keep going.
I'm ambitious, not necessarily as productive as I am ambitious, but it's good to have a list. One is Refill Fund 181, and I know that's a challenge, and we're working on it. I know Adam's been aware of this, and the home builders are as well. Then Title 21 issues that are coming. We have the rolled curbs. That's kind of the shorthand phrase I've been using for it. That's coming very soon. I think it was introduced, that's right. And we put it on the move to a February public hearing. So we'll have a work session on that and also address it at this, I think we've scheduled for the last meeting of this month. That's gone through the Planning Commission and plating and got a lot of feedback on that. Another one is on hazardous cleanup standards, and that should be coming to us pretty soon, I think. Then there's an omnibus Title 21 ordinance coming that I think Adam was working on that I think is working our way to. Craig, do you know about that, or is Adam here? I think we've gotten feedback on that. I forgot what it was.
I think, yeah, I know that's in already. Dave, do you remember? I think it already got a resolution out of P&Z.
Yeah. Thanks, Craig. Yeah, so the omnibus ordinance has gone through a couple of different commissions, both the Planning Board and Planning and Zoning Commission, and I believe should be coming to the Assembly here shortly.
Okay.
Is that what you had your hand up about, David?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, good, thanks. And then we also kind of run parallel to that is kind of the Building Code Title 23 omnibus is coming. And that, I know I went to a couple meetings of the building board as they reviewed it, and they were going through it pretty carefully, but I believe they're done, and that's coming to us real soon. We've got the big marijuana code omnibus change that we started working on. I think it's been adding to it over the last year and a half, so that's something that we should probably get done fairly soon. It was nothing huge, but cumulatively it was quite a lot. There's another project that is, gosh, at least 2 years old. And this is a change in the way we handle quasi-judicial issues that come to us. And that would be, of course, we do alcohol licenses, liquor licenses, but also rezones. And it would give, right now, it kind of gives a little more balance to the public. Now a petitioner can come in and they can have, 10 minutes maybe to make their pitch. They could use 2 and then have 8 or some amount of minutes at the end for rebuttal of what was heard in public hearing. This would give the public some rebuttal time as well and just balance that discussion a little bit more. So that is still being worked on. We have it largely done, but we wanted to play test it. So I've broached it with the UAA debate coach and asked if he could get the debaters to do it. And we have a little scenario that they might try. So that's where that's sitting right now. Another one is assessors routines for raw land, which we brought up before. Was working with Jack Adamus about it and making slight progress on that. But part of it, the new CAMA system will provide more information, and it might provide easily for every property enough, visibility into how the property was valued that we don't have to do too much. So I've been kind of sitting on that, waiting for the new CAMA system to get out. And I've looked at other cities that use the system that we'll be getting, and some provide very little information, some provide a huge amount. So it's really, I think the goal there is to make sure when we get that rolling that we provide a lot of data, you know, as much as the system will allow. Another one is to continue to look at secondary egress for subdivisions. Now, if our code limits, if you go over 30, you have to have a secondary egress, and that's, I think for fire safety is very important, and we've been sticking to that more or less, but it's something we want to look at. How do we provide more secondary egress? We've had on the hillside some progress with that, with the life safety road addition to our code, but there's still some issues to be looked at there. We also looked at bear carts and made a rule that in certain areas, strategic trash regulation zones, there would be, you would require bear carts. And we did, Girdwood is one, Clutna is one, and I'm not sure if we did another one on the hillside, but we had a request for one. So they were started rolling out, and the waste companies, Alaska Waste and Blue Arctic, were able to handle the load for the carts. But what has happened is some of those carts aren't working anymore, particularly in Girdwood. The bears have figured them out. So they were certified when they were put out there, but now they're not certified. So Alaska Waste has hundreds of these, perhaps 1,000 or more, that now have become uncertified. Well, what do? We tell them, well, you can't use those for our law? Technically, they can't, though they were certified when they were, you know, delivered to the homes. So we need to look at those and make it, you know, it's a trick to make it so it's not financially troubling for the, you know, trash haulers, but also we want to, you know, the bears are getting smart, you know, we want trash carts that they can't open, and they have figured it out.
Hey, John, can I interrupt for a second? David, do you
Yes,
still
please.
do you have another question, or was that just from before?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Weddleton, for bringing up all these issues. I would suggest that maybe planning be part of the conversation with respect to secondary access. I think this is obviously a fire code issue, but I will say that it comes up frequently in subdivisions, and I would love to be included in that conversation. So thank you, in that solution.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, that's because I think Title 21 has the secondary egress, doesn't it?
That's correct.
Yeah, so any of that land use stuff, and you're always invited to our meetings, of course. So, yes, I appreciate that. You're definitely, and if you have any thoughts on that, that's kind of something that we're always bumping into. And if you guys have anything in the works, we certainly want to be part of that.
I certainly have lots there, John. So yeah.
Good. Bear cart rules. Another one that came up when we met with the native village of Clutna was their property tax issues. They weren't taxed on some buildings, and they were. And I went to talk to the assessor's office, and they said, well, they need to know exactly what buildings the native village is thinking of. And I haven't heard back from Aaron Leggett yet, so I may ping him again. But once we get that, they'll go and research the history. Another one that it's been a frustration for Hillside, and I don't know, it might be even a Subursa issue, but, you know, we typically default to low bid for you know, any contractors in the city. So when you have a road service area, they go out to bid every couple of years, and then they go with a low bidder. But sometimes that low bidder has done poor work in previous years, and these service areas are very frustrated that they're stuck with this contractor that they don't work well with. And trying to look at some ways that we can do it more in an RFP style, something where previous history with the contractor would count. And that's all very tricky. And it's mostly what I've done so far is just listen to road service area people, give me their frustrations. And I haven't really done much I've talked to Maury Robinson a little bit, and a little bit of contact with purchasing about it. And then always is progress on the land use plan. So Dave and Craig, I think Dave's been involved, but you know, Michelle's done really good progress reports on that, because there has been a lot of progress on it, you know, just kind of going through the various, the skittle chart and showing what's been done on that. So I think we're doing that once a year sometime. It seems like it's been July, August time, but I definitely want to continue doing that. And any movement that you're working on, Dave and Craig, that we could be involved would be good. So that's my short list.
All right. Is there any of the assembly members who want to give their input on any of those topics that John? Oh, it looks like Chris does. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. I just have one to add, and that's an update to the tax abatement policies across the municipality.
Thank you. And then it looks like Crystal. Crystal, did you want to say something?
Yes, thanks. I wanted to add to the list the Chugaki River Comprehensive Plan. Just so we don't lose sight of that. It's outdated. It needs updated. Thanks.
All right. And I see that Pete's on. Pete, did you have any input? Just in case.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't prepared. I didn't know we were supposed to come up with ideas for this list. But I think this is a good start for us here. We have 20 items so far, so this will keep us busy for a couple months here for sure. Thanks.
I agree. Thank you, Pete. What about you, Felix? Do you have anything you want to input or contribute?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple items. So first, I want to echo what Mr. Constant added regarding the tax abatement policies, and in particular, I want to look at what are we doing to expand those tax abatement policies outside of downtown. Then second, I want us to look at alcohol licenses, and in particular, the structure for how we deal with these. I know that's been a perennial issue that has been brought up, and the Public Safety Committee, I think, I'm not sure if they're necessarily interested in spearheading that. So, I'm wondering if this committee might be a better home for that, since this committee already deals with marijuana license issues. And then the third thing, and I think this is sort of a top priority for me that I'll keep harping on, is I want us to see how we can this year get the TED project, the Tudor Elmore Development Project, back on track. And particularly would love to see if we can get some local developers in line and ready to invest. So those are my 3 priority areas for this year. Thanks.
That's great. Is there anybody else? Thank you, Felix, for that input. Is there anybody else that wanted to give any input? No. Okay. So, Chris, go ahead, Chris. I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. Just previously on the issue of the alcohol licenses, I have long argued that we should follow the state in their effort to reorganize how they address alcohol licensing. And what they did, and we talked about this before, is that those licenses are now under the Department of Commerce. And so just to dovetail into what Felix said, I would like us to really think closely about shifting all of our alcohol licensing matters from public safety to commerce. And then what we do, or to this committee, and what we do from there is, when there are issues with licenses that are failing to deliver, we shift the work over to public safety, where they're kind of not adjudicatory, but they look closely at the problem. And so I want to work on that project and really think through how we organize ourselves.
I think that's a great idea. Crystal's on, and she's with public safety. Crystal, how do you want? Oh, yep, there she is. Go ahead, Crystal.
Thank you. We have had that discussion, and of course, we're still trying to figure out why it is that public safety seems to have their name on there as sponsors for different licenses, when we really don't handle any of them unless, like Chris said, they happen to be a problem in a community, and we have to deal with how to try to fix those problems. So anyway, I think it probably works better to have something within the Community and Economic Development Committee to really, fine tune how we handle those. So I would just agree that, Chris is correct. It makes more sense for the licensing and this land use permitting to really go through this committee. And then when they become problem children, then we can deal with them from public safety perspective. So thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. John, how do you feel about that? I'd like to hear from you as far as your input. I agree with them, but I want to hear from you as well.
Oh, I think it's fine. We could get
good.
bogged down if we had to do a lot of them, but because we get kind of bursts of alcohol license, but most are pretty standard. They're not really controversial.
All right. So are you ready to go on to ongoing business, John?
Well, no, I'd like to, we have time today to flesh some of these things out. If we could, and I think one is the, and then maybe even prioritize things. The idea on the tax abatement policies, because we've got that variety of things in the land use plan that would be done. But it just maybe from Chris and Felix, say, what kind of ideas are you looking at, or what would be the ones that you would prioritize?
So I'll jump in quick. For my part, I heard Felix loud and clear. That's why I said citywide when he previously discussed the idea of making those tax abatement opportunities more broadly available. So that's one. Second, for me, it's renewing the Fairview, the downtown one that is set to expire, but it's never been used because it's just got some practical challenges. And then third is working with Adam and team, because they have some really good ideas, and what we should be doing is having a robust conversation about how to restructure that section, because there are probably things we haven't thought about. Some may require state action, but I want to make sure we're working closely with the administration's vision on the development part of this to use those tools. And so those are the three elements that I would add. And it's not expand downtown, it's renew downtown. It's expand community-wide, renew downtown, and work with administration for how we might develop better, newer programs.
And yeah, and I guess from my perspective, I guess the only thing I would add is, yeah, I think right on with what Chris said, and in particular, for some time, downtown has been sort of the test zone for what we would hope to be RFAs, reinvestment focus areas that we would expand to other parts of town. So that's what I talk about. That's what I mean when I'm talking about sort of expanding those type of opportunities in other places of our city. And just like you said, John, the 2040 land use plan does do a good job of targeting those specific areas that might be good zones for RFAs. I know some of it's in Spenard, some of it's in Midtown. And so would love to see if we can move forward on some of those aspects in 2040.
Felix, I have a question to ask you. With what you just said, is there, when you're looking at the list 1 through 23, where do you feel that it belongs on the, I mean, I know it's overwhelming right now because John just ran through it, but where do you feel it should be at as priority for us?
Yeah, so, for me, these tax abatement policies are meant to help increase development, and in particular, housing. So, and we know that housing is a huge need in our city. So for me, I mean, it would definitely be a high priority for us to see if we can craft those policies and implement those policies needed so that we can increase development.
All right, that sounds good. Mandy, do you think, and Felix and Chris, since you've been addressing this, would you put that up in the top 5, Felix? Would that work for you? Or top 3?
Yeah, certainly somewhere in the top 5 to 10, I think would be good for me.
Chris,
and I think that, yeah, I would, from a terms of ranking, I would put this as a 2022 goal, right? Okay. So it could fit anywhere within the matrix of the year. It doesn't have to be, in the next month or two, but this year.
Sounds good. Anybody else have any input on the ranking of where they see things? I mean, we're obviously going to be coming back to this list, but maybe it would help John and I to better run the committee if we know where you guys want these laid as well. John, do you have I know you went through them, John, and I don't believe that you went through them in any particular order other than maybe by your memory. Is there a place that you see some of those you want to move up to?
I don't have a good memory. I have these jotted down in 4 different places. This would be high. I'd be curious from Dave and Craig, what you guys may be working on these. I mean, there must be other RFAs being contemplated, and perhaps, you've got some experience with them now, maybe some changes.
I see Chris. Chris, did you want to say something again? Or
I'm sorry, that was old. I didn't, if I'm... Okay.
Craig, David, do you have any input?
I don't know if Dave has anything to add. I'm feeling too new to make a quick decision on it. So Dave, do you have any sense of any of these priority wise?
I was just going to address Mr. Weddleton's question on RFAs. I would mention that, we are working on the RFA ordinance, and we will be bringing that to the assembly here in 2022. So you should expect to see that here within the next several months.
Excellent. All right, John, where do you want to go from here? Is there any more input on our goals?
Before we move on, quick.
Oh, go
I
ahead,
think
Chris.
Ms. Kennedy put herself in the queue, and I did too.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead, Miss Kennedy.
Nope, thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the tax abatement thing too as well. And this kind of ties in. It's not quite the same thing that I think we're trying to get to, but it does impact assessments and in terms of how we promote housing, especially in this case for seniors. One of the things that I was working on the last couple months was in regard to a plan or an idea of allowing seniors to actually carry their senior exemption into their senior housing if they decide to go live at one of our new senior housing facilities. We have a really nice new one. We have a couple others that are going to be developed here soon. And because they have the ability to have their, or that they have the eligibility for a senior tax exemption, I was trying to figure out how they can actually allow that to apply to the facility that they live in as well, which would basically reduce the cost of the facility itself, and then would also end up saving money for the senior who happens to be living there. So anyway, it's kind of a concept that Juno's been working with, and Frank Bickford has been, talking to me about. So if we can include something like that in there, which really is just more of a way of changing the criteria for a senior tax exemption, then I think we ought to work on that too. Right now, my understanding is that until the state law changes for that, we can't do anything. So we may have to work on that particular angle from, not just from a code perspective, but from, a legal and state legislation perspective. So just kind of want to put it out there so that it's kind of something that's a thought that continues on, and maybe we can work on that just from a legislative perspective for the next, for this session, who knows? But anyway, so just wanted to put that on the book so that everybody knows that it's a thought, it's an idea that hopefully we can use in the future. Thanks. Oh, and I just also wanted to put down there on item number 20 now, it just says Chugach Eagle River. That was the Chugach Eagle River Comprehensive Plan. So probably ought to fill in those words so we don't lose sight of exactly what that was referencing.
Thank you, Ms.
Crystal.
Kennedy. Chris, do you mind if I go ahead and respond to Ms. Kennedy before you? Okay. So Ms. Kennedy, Crystal, can I get this straight? So you're asking that even though they don't actually own property, the seniors anymore, that you wanted to be able to give them a tax exemption if they were to move into an assisted living facility?
That is correct. It's the idea of them having that eligibility that they can use if they own property. If they don't own property and aren't using it for any other property, then or aren't using that eligibility for any other property, then they could use it for the facility that they are living in. So yes.
Okay, I wonder if that opens up Pandora's box, because you're looking at, there's a military exemption, right? And they can only have it on their primary residence. And I understand that them seniors moving into a facility would then be their primary residence. But I don't know fiscally if that's
that
fair.
becomes their primary residence. So the idea is whatever their primary residence is basically makes them eligible for applying their own tax deduction to that property.
Is it if they move in with in-laws or somebody, or is it if they just move into a senior facility?
They would have to either own it, or that would be their primary residence. So if it's, and that's the other, certainly that's a detail that we have.
That's a conversation. Mm-hmm.
But it's the idea of making that housing. I mean, if you've looked into senior housing, it's not cheap. So
No, it's not.
anything that helps reduce the cost that the facility has to charge a resident will help to basically make that housing more affordable.
Yeah, I'd have to be convinced of that one. Okay, Mr. Constant, can you go ahead?
Yeah, I'll be brief. Two things, just on the context of what you were just discussing, Crystal. I think that's an interesting leap to be able to claim a senior exemption, even if you are, say, a property owner. That turns into like a tax credit program, like a child tax credit. No, it's very interesting. But a step before that would be, and I don't know what the standards are at this time, allowing an individual who owns property, who moves into a senior facility, not to lose their tax deduction on their primary residence because they can no longer live there, right? It's so there's, I think, two processes there we should be looking at. But that's my comment was really about all of these tax abatement issues as a whole. We put Dave and we put Craig on the spot. I want to make sure that we recognize this is a conversation we should be having with the department heads because they're working on vision level elements to this as well as the practical level. And so not that Craig wouldn't have that insight or Dave, but the primary movers on this will be the department head. So I want to make sure we're really clear that those are the folks we need to nail in this conversation with.
I would agree. John, do you have any input or anybody else after John? I don't see anybody in queue unless if I missed you, please speak up.
You know, on that particular issue, I had talked to Frank and JR Wilcox about it a couple times over the years. And at my understanding, that Crystal, maybe you're more current on it, but we do, I just kind of parked it because we need a change in state law to let us do anything like that. Is that correct?
Yes, apparently, because it's considered an exemption. If it isn't already allowed by state law, we can't provide the exemption. We can only provide exemptions for what the state is already considered permissible. So yeah, it has to go there first.
I do have another item, Jamie, if it's, unless you want to
Sure. No, go ahead, John.
stuff more. You know, this is, I don't know if it belongs in this committee or where, but you know, we have this big infrastructure bill coming at us that people are scrambling to figure out. And, you know, it's fairly challenging. It's a huge amount of money. A lot of it is grant based. So we compete with other people even across the country for the funds. And, you know, that takes focused grant writers, goals. What do we want it for? And the money for? And sorry. And it's fairly complex. So, you know, some conversation obviously with the administration say, what are they doing? What's our plan? I mean, this is something we need to do together to be more effective. And then just as background, what I've been doing on the hillside is working with the state legislators, Kaufman, Revac, and Holland, a little bit with Laddie Shaw, and the community councils and the road service areas. We've done a survey of, you know, what are their projects? And it's tricky on the hillside, Turning an Arm, and even Girdwood a bit, because, you know, for at least the transportation projects, you go to the tip and you say, well, let's just do some projects in the tip. They've already been vetted. They've gone through a public process. So it makes sense. But those areas don't, part of them, they're outside of AMATs, but even the hillside that's within AMATs doesn't get projects on the tip because we have no way to get the match typically. So we don't even really consider them. But so we're looking at one, how to get past that. And then projects that might be something like, you know, $50 million for wrapping dirt roads on the hillside. Okay, so there are a whole bunch of projects just wrapped up into one bucket, and then figure out how to allocate it. You know, that's complicated too. So, but these are things we're starting to work on kind of just within my district. But this conversation needs to be across the whole city, and we need to get ready because other cities and places are gearing up and getting teams of grant writers and focusing on it, and we're gonna get whooped. We won't get what we can out of it. So, and I don't know where to do that. And that would be a good one for Craig and Dave or anyone else from the administration, and thoughts from others. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks. And I think you're thinking right down the right path there, John. And I think the method is similar to what we did with the CARES Act funding, we first set up working group between the administration and the assembly, kind of set out some priorities, and then we thought about staffing or contractors that could help do key tasks to ensure our competitiveness. We also, like through the rescue plan, hired navigators for public entities, not public, members of the public and nonprofits and other organizations to help them apply for funds that are probably going to become available. And so I think having it can start here to scope it out, and having a broad working group work session where we identify our methodologies for approaching the infrastructure bill is really wise. And I think it should be a top level priority, because that is the time on that is time is of the essence, and the window will close quickly.
Thank you, Chris. John, did you want to respond to that or anything?
Well, that's a good idea, actually. That would be, when do we have our next rules committee? Felix, do you know? Or anyone? I don't know. I'm picking on Felix because he was chair so long.
I think there's one this month, but I don't know the exact date.
Okay. Yeah, this would be a good one to. Yeah, to go back and look at. Yeah, that's a good notion, Chris.
So the next rules committee is on Thursday, January 13th.
Oh, so it's coming up. Okay.
Okay. Well, I'll bring it up with Suzanne and try to make this a key item.
I saw Miss Kennedy might be having a question. Miss Kennedy, did you want to say anything?
Well, I didn't mean to change the subject right here, but I did have something to kind of expand on in the idea of working on the egress and the fire code, for the secondary access roads that have limited single access. One of the issues with that was sprinkler systems being required for people down roads with that only single access. And I wanted to expand that. Yeah, it's number 16. There you go. And I just kind of wanted to expand the thought on that to make sure that it's not just about trying to increase access and having that secondary access. It's also about trying to have better criteria for when some of that fire code is applied in regard to requiring the sprinkler systems. I'm hoping that we could build in a criteria that says that there's an exemption for those that are within a certain mileage of a fire department, so that, because we've got a road that we had secondary access issues with here in Eagle River, and it's actually a road that's less than 3 miles away from the fire station. So I'm hoping that we can have better criteria that says that only applies if you're within a certain distance away from a fire station. So anyway, just to keep that thought in mind as well when we work on that particular fire code. And I know Adam's aware of that. I've had that conversation with him too. I just think that that's one of the other ways that's actually costing builders a lot of money, costing new homeowners a lot of money. And we can help with that, since, we worked on it with the idea of just having the fire hydrant issue was basically the way we were dealing with it on the last one. But the secondary access or lack of secondary access still keeps that requirement in place for those new homes. So I think we can help with that. So, thanks.
Thank you, Miss Kennedy. And I just wanted to chime in on that. That's really important out here in Eagle River. And I would assume that it's pretty important out in Hillside. I would personally like to move that up as a priority. I know that John and I have intent of addressing all these issues in 2022, but I definitely want to make sure that that's one of the priorities, because I think it goes hand in hand with the lack of housing that we do have in the municipality. And this would be important so that folks who are ready to move up in their housing open up housing for those who are just becoming new time home buyers as well. Does anybody else have any comment on what Ms. Kennedy has proposed as one of the items? And Craig, I hope your fingers are writing all this down. We could also send it to you. Go ahead. Is that you, John?
Yeah, I think that is a pressing issue, certainly. And you're tied into secondary egress. I mean, we've got, how do you get exemptions and so on, but also we've got that life safety road as an area-wide, responsibility now. So we did we got funding for a really significant connection, Mountain Air, up off Rabbit Creek, connecting the area east of Golden View. So that's big. But so part of that is also how do we get these connections, not just how to get exemptions from them. So this is really a lot of pieces for this one.
I agree with you, John, that the building, people, even though we're in the deep of winter right now, truly building is right around the corner, and we need to be able to address these issues for the builders on how to better write this law so that we can move forward with certain homes that no matter what we do or no matter what we say, they're only going to have one-way access into their homes. It's just the way our surroundings are and our environment. So I definitely want that as something that we address. Does anybody else have any comments on anything on this 2022? Or John, do you want to continue on this topic?
If we're switching this one on the math specs, and it's, I don't know what they stand for, MASS, but is that to Craig or Dave? Have you guys run into this at all as an issue?
So I just raised my hand and then you asked me the question, but MASS is Municipality of Anchorage Standard and Specifications, or Standard Specifications. That's what it means. We have not been involved recently on that. I don't know that they've monkeyed with them for a little bit, unless Dave has some insight on that.
I do not.
Okay, I mean, I'll get more specific. So it was just discussions with Wolfgang, a month or so ago, and he was just kind of threw that out there. It's just they run into these problems, that when they do a road like that, we'll do an AMAS project that they'll run, and he says, well, sometimes they can't buy stuff that they're supposed to be buying because of the municipal specs. But I'll get some more details on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard for a long time the challenges of our meaning municipalities standards on a certain roadway, and because the DOT designs and builds all of the AMATS funded projects, all the federal aid projects, that's when you run up against that, because the state is designing it, but it's a city facility, and so the city wants to make sure that they have their standards met, and sometimes there's a little challenge with that.
So who owns the MASS document?
MASS it's the Municipality of Anchorage Standard Specifications.
Yeah,
and
but it's
the state has their
department, or
that's Kent Colhase. That's PM&E.
PM&E. Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember who exactly is working on it over there, but yeah.
I think Chris. Question, Chris, is it relevant to what Craig is talking about? You want to chime in?
Yeah, thank you. It is, I think, a sub bullet or super bullet to this, or a sidebar. I'm not sure, but we have the kind of ongoing Midtown congestion and relief efforts, and we have the Seward to Glen mobility project, the PELs, if you will. And in some ways they're good, and in some ways they're continuing to create challenges, in particular as it relates to land use issues on the pathways of these projects. And so I want to ensure that we have a good focus on monitoring the overarching PEL processes on roadways traveling through our residential areas. And so I'm not sure what that looks like exactly, but there are some discussions about the department, the community, whatever the final name of this department is, taking on some of the project management by MOA if the state is willing. And so having kind of contemplating the various opportunities, threats, et cetera, of those projects would be, I think, a good use at least of some time of this committee.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Craig, did you want to respond, or are you okay?
Sure. I know that under the previous administration, Kent Colhase was really championing, shepherding that, trying to get the language worked out so that there could be some agreement. The up in Fairbanks, the city of Fairbanks designs any federal aid project on their own facilities And that's what Kent was trying to do down here, was get the same opportunity for the city to at least design them, if not, not build them, but design them. So we're happy to work with Kent as well. But that's who was working on it before, trying to get some language that worked for the state to get that allowed.
Right, and so that's one side of it, which is the actual doing the thing. And then the other side, though, is ensuring that the thing pays attention to the land uses in our community, as opposed to just being a mobility of vehicles project. Because, when that downtown, the Glenda Seward connection project moves forward, that's the most dense urban community land use we have, abutting a federal highway, and it just requires special attention across the board. So there's two pieces there. One is monitoring the land use. One is possibility of us doing as much of that work as possible so that it does do what I previously stated. And I love having Kent on board. All hands on deck.
Thank you, Chris. John, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Not on that item. I do want to look back at this Chugach River Comprehensive Plan bullet. And, maybe change that to district plans and add, Chugach River is one, because Girdwood is also working on one. And then, it gets to Dave, what other, area or district plans are in the works now?
Yeah, thanks, John. Actually, we're working on the downtown plan right now. In fact, I'm reading it today. So yeah, we're working on that, and hopefully you'll see that here this year.
Oh, so how far is that?
I believe it's gone through Planning and Zoning Commission.
Oh, great. Okay. So that's much further than the others. Are there any others that, do you have any scheduled to roll out?
Not at this time. The downtown plan, I believe, is what we're working on right now. I do know that there is an effort in Girdwood to make some amendments to their code, and we're working with the community on that. But that's not, we're not at a point yet where we're going to present that to the assembly.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other districts that
I'm in the
wanted
queue
to
for
add?
that. If I could jump in quick.
Of course, go ahead.
Thank you. So, John, I think you hit the nail on the head starting the question, and what you suggested there is move Chugach Eagle River after the term district plans. So you have downtown Girdwood, Chugach Eagle River. And I think that there is a broader issue question here that we could really think about, right? So historically, like you and Suzanne have had to fight for chump change on the side out of the cushions of the couch to help the neighbors out there do this work. And in some ways, there's this ongoing conversation about how, well, it's really their responsibility to figure out how to fund this. And there's also the argument that, well, these are municipal plans and we have staff. And so I think a super question to this effort is, how do we determine which plans are coming in and how they're paid for? Because it seems like some get support, others don't. And we should come up with a methodology that we support generally these plans in a way that is fair to communities across the community. I don't know if I'm making sense there, but the idea is a process question, not a specific content question.
John, did you want to respond?
It's certainly a fair thought. I don't know that there is a prioritization. There is within code, if any area wants to do their own, there's a process they can go through and have it ultimately, sanctioned by the city. Dave and Craig, what do you know?
Dave wants to speak. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Yeah, this is a challenge that we face, all the time here is a community's desire to update their plan or establish a plan, and our ability to provide the resources to help them through that. It's a challenge. There is no, hierarchy or ranking necessarily of priorities. But I will say, Mr. Constant is correct. Figuring out a way to provide those resources to get these plans done is a real challenge. It's something that I don't necessarily have an answer to, but I can say that it is a challenge. It's a problem.
And I just want to put a coda on that whole thing that, some years, and I just use you, John, as an example, and I say this with pride for you because you're so good at it, that, you know, we are able to find $10,000 and $20,000 right here. Boom, Girdwood's getting an update. And I, though, don't have to do that. They just put the downtown plan into the flow and it's happening, right? And so to me, having a conversation thoughtfully about policy that drives a fairness approach to that and not restricts it explicitly, but that drives at least that element to it, I think would be more fair, because then you don't get neighborhoods feeling left out or like they're going to have to fight in a way that is aggressive against other neighborhoods, pitting neighborhoods against neighborhoods. I just don't like that idea. So that policy level conversation would be helpful, I think.
I agree with Mr. Constant on that. John, did you want to respond before I go on to Mr. Rivera?
No, I mean, I mean, that's a complicated thought. I mean, we do need to think about that. I mean, and maybe to throw even a more bigger complication in here is we have kind of our core document for the stack of plans that is our comprehensive plan. That core document anchors 2020. Well, we're in 2022 now.
Yeah.
So at some point, and I know there are people saying, well, time to do a whole new core document. So, and Dave's head is spinning now and Craig's. So, but I think that's on our list of things to do, and certainly contemplating ways to prioritize is important.
Sounds good. Does Mr. Rivera, do you want to go ahead and speak?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the point that Mr. Constant raised, and I don't necessarily have a solution, but I do know that many times when folks are asking for money, the question is, okay, that's good. That part of town can get their money, but what about my part of town? When are we going to get money to do our district plan? So I think having some type of mechanism, rubric, something in place, I think would be helpful. But the reason I got in the queue, though, was to add, as folks know, Meg and I are working with ACDA to develop some type of midtown partnership, or the idea of some type of midtown partnership. And one of the pieces that may come with that is the development, or at least pushing for the development of a midtown plan, because I think, as folks know, most of the business core in Midtown does not have a plan, and there's a long history to that. So that might be something that comes in the works, but I don't suspect that'll be a 2022 thing. That's probably going to be more longer term, but just wanted to put that on the radar since we're talking about plans. Thanks.
Thank you. Did you want Mandy to go ahead and put that on the document? Mandy, could you add that for Mr. Rivera? Oh, there you go. Thank you. David, did you have your hand up still? Did you have a question before I move on to Ms. Kennedy?
Oh, thank you, Ms. Howard. I was just going to address Mr. Constant's comment on the downtown plan and that just kind of happening. Yes, you're correct, Mr. Constant. It is happening, but that was really born by the update to Title 21 and the need to update the downtown code. So as you're aware, it's kind of a three-part process. So that's where that really came from.
Dave, absolutely agree. And the challenge, though, is I get my neighbors looking at me side-eye, like, how are you doing this when my neighborhoods can't get that? And so what it all begs for is a more open methodology for making these decisions. I totally agree that we had to update the downtown plan because this is 10 years after the new Title 21, we needed the downtown to comport. But that said, again, John effectively advocates that it's 10 or 20 grand and his neighborhood's progressing, but there's another neighborhood that's like, but what about me? And we don't have the resources. And so it's like he who gets, or she who gets there first wins. That's not, I don't think that's the best public policy. I think that we can be smarter.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. And I would agree. And I'm pretty sure I have a great idea, or an idea what Ms. Kennedy is going to be saying next. Go ahead, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I just want to say thanks to Chris. I appreciate him bringing that up because it's absolutely an issue with Chugach-Eagle River, especially with the Chugach-Eagle River, even with the Chugach-Eagle River Advisory Board. You know, that board has been authorized through the Title 21 updates and, you know, in our chapter of Title 21, and they still do not have staff support. So even for something as simple as just having monthly meetings or whenever regular meetings the board needs to have, they don't have any staff support. So whatever we can do to really pin down how we're going to use staff and what staff, and if we need new staff or whatever else, we've got to figure that out, and we've got to do it quickly. Because like I said, this advisory board has basically, even an audit report that came out made them look really bad because they just haven't had the support that they need. So whatever we can do to kind of nail down what kind of funding we want or whose responsibility this is going to be. I think not only will it help with these district-wide plans and comprehensive plans, but even something as simple as having the advisory board be able to function better would all be addressed then. So let's do it. Let's find a way to have this conversation about this process, if you will, and figuring out how we get it funded. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. I'm going to ask the group here, since we're all sitting here, and it's been a good conversation so far. Do any of you object to being able to put that on as we get staff support for the supervisory board? Only because we are at a standstill, and it could drive us in a direction where, with their opinions and their staff support, we could better determine what's needed out here in Chugach Eagle River. Would any of you mind putting that on the 2022 goals list? Any objection to that? Mandy, can you add that, please? And I do appreciate Mr. Constant bringing that up. It's kind of the term fair. What is fair for each precinct, each district, to neighborhood, to be able to say, hey, you're getting this, how come we can't get something over here? I think that spreads across the entire municipality. I think everybody has that same concern. All right, John, go ahead. Do you have anything?
I have a thought on that. I don't know if it's a category or a goal here, but if Chugach Eagle River has some autonomy because you run your own parks and rec. You do your roads as sort of a united area to a large extent. You have your lighting districts. Your regime for street lighting is very different from the rest of Anchorage. And then I look at Girdwood, and Girdwood has, road powers, parks. They do their cemetery, is their own thing. They have police powers, and they hire Whittier. I think there's some others in there too. And they have, a elected Girdwood Board of Supervisors that's, very much like an assembly for their area, the way they make their decisions. And they have a city manager, essentially, in Kyle Kelly and Margaret. So they have that staff that's very professional and get the work done. So when I look at Eagle River, I go, where is that component? Particularly when you hear Eagle Exit, it's really, do we split the cities up, or is it just a plea for more autonomy? And I say, how do you get Eagle River more towards the Girdwood model, where there's a huge amount of autonomy and they own it? There's an incredibly tight community. It's amazing. So maybe Chugach Eagle River is too big to parallel that. But there's look at the staff Girdwood has, and they tax themselves for it, so they pay on their own for that staff. How do you parallel that in Eagle River? Would you want to? I don't know, but kind of as we've been, Eagle Exit's kind of been highlighted more in the last week or so. They've kind of been thinking about this more, but that really ramps up. It's more than just someone to staff a board, but how do you staff your district and have more control?
Thank you, John. I think that's a very that's a good point, and I don't know if it's we just didn't think of it in that realm, but I wouldn't think that the people of Chugach Eagle River would be against being able to fund their own support for the soup board. I think that's probably a very good idea. The more coming from what Chris is bringing forward to potentially go on the ballot, and Ms. Kennedy and I, about departing the municipality or exploring the opportunity to perhaps do that. This allows, it just kind of keeps putting us in the direction of moving off with independent government from the MOA. Ms. Kennedy, did you want to speak on what John had just mentioned by any chance?
Well, You know, I mean, I guess we can have a whole conversation on it. So I think we've at least identified some of the problem, the issue, and we can put it up as something to discuss later. You know, I don't really want to belabor that particular point at this point. But there's definitely a need for a whole conversation about how we address, you know, what is obviously a gap or a need or a shortage or whatever you want to call it. So I'll
Yeah,
leave
and
it
I
at
just
that for now.
yeah, and I wanted to follow up. I mean, Girdwood is a city on its own. We do fall under the umbrella of the borough, but it's the same as Eagle River, Chugach. It's a city on their own, and but we do fall under the umbrella. So yeah, we just have to further discuss that. Thank you, John. Does anybody else have any comments about the 2022 goals? I don't see anybody. John, how are you feeling about moving on to? It looks like we don't really have any new business or ongoing business.
No, I think we add that ongoing business, but Mandy's making a little thing that, it's not active for the particular meeting, so we don't have the various stakeholders and so on involved.
All
So
right. Well,
it's like placeholders for us. And if she gets aggressive, she's going to add all 20 something of these on there, but I don't think we're ready for that. So,
that's right. Does anybody have any other comments? It looks like, John, you said we weren't going to have too long of a meeting. And if nobody has any further comments, I would like each member, if they have any. Oh, Chris does. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, that whole list that we just developed, whatever process we're going to use to refine it, I think that should be forwarded into the rules committee and kind of set up into the goals document that Claire has been working on organizing, and in some way reflected there, because I think what we've just done is a really good model for other committees and other processes to look at the scope of work for their efforts and how that flows into our overall goals. So then we can start to really infuse that process with this rubber meets the road part of the conversation.
I agree. Mandy, do you think you can perhaps clean up our little work there and send that draft over to Chair LaFrance and Vice Chair Constant so that they could review that for the Rules Committee meeting and perhaps get it on the agenda to discuss?
Sure,
I don't know
I can
when,
do that.
but thank you. Does anybody else have any comments? All right, then I'm going to let the last comment go to Mr. Weddleton before, if Mr. Weddleton, if you're okay with ending our meeting sooner than later.
well, I
if
think
we have any last minute.
if we have time,
Sure.
I'm sorry, if there's any audience participation, you could.
Oh, there you go. I
Might as well call.
apologize. So if there's any members of the public, Mandy, is there anybody waiting in queue to speak, or does anybody want to speak up for audience participation?
I have one phone number, so it's *6 if you would like to speak, to unmute yourself.
I think it might be just a listening participation. I think it was press, but I'm not really sure. Does the individual want to speak up and say anything, or are you just here for listening? Okay, it looks like they're just there for listening. Mandy, do you see anybody else that might want to speak that I might be missing?
I do not.
Okay, John? Oh, it was
Good.
Brandon M. He said no comments from me. Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. Okay, go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
Oh, I've got nothing more. I think this is a good list to work on, and I think we can. Yeah, running it by the Rules Committee would be good.
All right, and Chris, you're in agreement that running it by the Rules Committee, sending it to you and Ms. LaFrance is the way you want to go?
Absolutely, but again, I want you to understand it's to demonstrate to other committee leadership that this is the way to act, not to just, get that committee to do anything. This is great work.
Good. I'm glad everybody's happy. Mr. Rivera, do you have anything to say, or Pete?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I'm happy with the process today and looking forward to working on this throughout the year. Thank you.
Excellent. Pete, do you have any last minute comments?
But thank you, Madam Chair. And I was just thinking about the priority of these items. It's a fairly long list. And the omnibus ordinances probably are going to take longer, so they probably will be further down on the priority list. I noticed the bear carts, if that's something we might want to get finished before the bears come out next spring. that might need to be moved up. Just off the top of my head, that's a couple of things that I noticed from the list. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Pete. Miss Kenny, do you have any comments?
No, I just think we have our work cut out for us. Actually, I guess I do have a comment though. One of the things that I was wondering is how do we keep this list in front of us to be referred to on a relatively frequent basis? It's nice to have a list, but I was just thinking in terms of the list that the Public Safety Committee has, and we just check back on that periodically, but we really don't have a schedule for looking at what we have. We keep it on the website, but I haven't even looked at it in the last several months. So anyway, that would be a question is, so how do we keep this list front and center?
I think once we bring it into, and anybody else can chime in too, but I think once we bring it in front of the Rules Committee for Mr. Constant and LaFrance, I think it gives the assembly members an opportunity to, maybe we send it out to each of the members. We prioritize what we feel is important on those lists, but we keep it in front of the Rules Committee and our committee that we're having right now. And that perhaps John and I will keep that on under ongoing business or a new business, and we just keep rolling through it. But I think it has to be front and center in order for us to accomplish our goals. Constant, Felix, do any of you guys have any comments on that? Go ahead, Chris.
I would suggest that I like the idea of sending it out to folks to prioritize, but I think mostly folks are just going to say, oh, nice list. But what we also do is take the next step with the list, and it could be at the next meeting or the next couple of weeks, where we kind of sort them into functional areas. And no goal means anything unless it has a deadline on it or some kind of timeline to it. And
Agreed.
so what I think a good next step would be is to kind of calendar these over the course of the year with an kind of just an idealistic approach, like aspirational, like these are how we want to get to them. So then we can check back on a quarterly basis. It can be brought up at every meeting, and we can see where progress is happening. And that can help staff also to understand how their efforts are. And they can then also input on the calendaring, so we have a functional, realistic plan that has deadlines.
I absolutely agree. John, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, that makes sense. And as I look at it, I mean, some things are in various states of progress. I mean, like these, the Title 23 Omnibus, that's coming to us shortly. I mean, that's on a schedule, and we'll see it soon. Same with most of the Title 21s that I mentioned. Bear cart rules are, some I've been working on over the last year, but it's been pretty complicated. But that would be,
so,
yeah. I mean, anything in the
interrupt you briefly.
next month, we could probably put it on the.
What I would suggest is that you two, the chairs and staff, sit down together and just spitball a calendar. Like break it up any way you guys think makes sense for the work plan, and then bring that back to the body, this committee, rather than us trying to do it with 8 members and 4 staff.
I agree. And I heard what Felix had said about the, summer's coming, and a lot of these issues are going to be weather dictated, right? Building code, trying to get things done before people start building, and the bear cans before bears start waking up. And I think that's in about, 65 days. So you're correct. I think that's a good idea. John, I'm willing to do that. And I also wanted to bring up in regards, John and I wanted to have this particular meeting in person, but natural disasters and God had a totally different plan. And I just want to say thank you to Mandy for being here. It's been a little bit hard for her. She was trapped in Cantwell with 40-foot snow drifts. So I'm glad she made it back safe and sound. And I would like to look forward to being able to meet in person, hopefully at our next meeting. And I think Mr. Weddleton is on board for that as well.
Yeah, where we can. Yeah.
Yeah, where we can. And if anybody has anything else or any input, Mr. Weddleton, I'm going to leave you with the last word, and then you can decide when we want to adjourn.
Oh, I think we're ready to adjourn.
All right, then I'm going to request that we adjourn.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.